This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, brown shirts on the American campus. Backed by popular demand, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and he also writes the blog The Point at frontpagemag.com. Daniel Greenfield, what an honor to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Thanks for having me on again.
Daniel, some really scary, bizarre developments on American campuses recently. Tell us about what happened at the University of Missouri and at Yale.
The Chinese Cultural Revolution has come to American campuses. It's accompanied by these crime mobs of crowds clamoring that they feel unsafe, that they feel threatened because other people have freedom of speech, and that freedom of speech has to be shut down.
Thank you, Daniel. And tell us about the resignations.
The first thing that they're trying to do is force the resignations of administrators for not immediately complying with their demands. Now, their demands are, first of all, for racial quotas, for what they call racial competency training, which means indoctrinating faculty and students with mandatory white privilege and other racial training, which would tell them that white people are evil and that minority groups are threatened in America. So they begin with this. They claim that the campus is unsafe unless they get this kind of a cultural revolution racial training in place. If administrators don't immediately comply, they clamor for their resignation, and they've gotten their way now. So effectively, they're rushing the campus.
Right, and tell us about how the fascists got their way in terms of how they forced these resignations.
They had resignations at Missouri. At Yale, they forced apologies. If you look at the latest at Vanderbilt, they came out and took all their petitions right away, even though these petitions, again, basically demand indoctrination of a faculty. They demand minority quotas for instructors, even in engineering schools. In nursing schools, it doesn't matter. They want the same racial agenda, racial indoctrination everywhere.
Right, Daniel, and we see this brown shirt mentality also, as you have said, these Maoist red guards. We see this Stalinist totalitarian spirit on the American campuses. So let's begin with talking about their demands. Let's begin with this. They want free tuition. They also want to erase all of their debt. Now, here's the question. How is this going to work? Who's actually going to pay for this?
They feel entitled to it, so they don't care who pays for it. They already live in an environment in which other people pay for their demands. These people are community organizers in waiting. Their whole agenda is get free stuff, be in charge of distributing free stuff, and get paid to distribute free stuff.
You know, Daniel, I'm also very interested in how these people see themselves as quote-unquote victims. For instance, my family's from the Soviet Union. I mean, we come from a background and from an evil empire where, you know, suffering and victimization is associated with, synonymous with the Gulag, with Kolyma, with mass starvation, with the purges. I'm just wondering, in that context, what kind of victims are these? They seem pretty well fed to me. They scream and yell on the assumption that nothing's going to happen to them. They have iPhones, etc., etc. What kind of victims are these exactly?
They're professional victims. What's going on now is this kind of catastrophizing in which they claim that just about any inconvenience makes them feel unsafe, that it makes them feel brutalized, that America is conducting genocide, and so on and so forth. You see it with Coates in his recent book. There's this kind of idea that America is engaging in war against the black body and the brown body, and that just about anything that upsets them or inconveniences them is part of a process of genocide. This kind of rhetoric is hysterical, it's ridiculous, but it's going over really well in an over-entitled society.
Right, Daniel, and let's focus in on their tactics here. These brown shirts on the campuses, they're talking about tuition, then they're talking about racism, then they're talking about Black Lives Matter. So overall, we see a conflation here of class war and race war, correct?
It's Marxism. The whole idea that was being played originally was that race replaced class. Instead of having the original class classification, race was just swapped into it. And you even see liberals like Jonathan Chait now talking about it, that political correctness rests on this kind of race replacing class. So so race war just became class warfare.
So Daniel, what has actually even happened? Why are these students saying they're unsafe? Can they actually, what has actually transpired? What are they pointing to that they're so afraid of and that they feel so unsafe about?
First of all, they can claim that anything makes them feel unsafe. So, for example, they've claimed that posters in support of free speech make them feel unsafe, and they want the perpetrator of the free speech posters punished. They claim that faculty not immediately responding to their concerns makes them feel unsafe. They feel that any disagreement makes them feel unsafe. It's classic victimhood in which they claim that anything makes them feel unsafe, and that the only way to fix this is to punish or remove or fire anything that they claim makes them feel unsafe. This has no grounding in any reasonable position, but it's hysteria. It's very loud, vocal, aggressive hysteria, and the media broadcasts it and people respond to it.
You know, Daniel, and it's fascinating and scary how the leftists have worked out this strategy about how they're the victims and feeling unsafe. For instance, a hero like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who would come to an American campus and speak about Islamic gender apartheid and the true victims of Islamic gender apartheid and how she herself was victimized. And a hero like that is speaking on behalf of the victims of true terror and totalitarianism. And yet, these fascists on the American campus have this strategy where they feel unsafe that she's coming to campus. So somewhere she's not the victim and she's not representing the true victims. They're actually the victims and they don't feel safe when Ayaan Hirsi Ali comes to the campus. So it's very interesting, this tactic that they're implementing.
Well, the perpetrators are playing the victims. The people who silence free speech claim that they're feeling silenced. The people who make campuses unsafe for other people. I mean, if you've seen the Dartmouth video, they're running around their library, they're screaming obscenities at students, they're terrorizing students who want to study for not joining them. By the way, this is just a flashback to all these 60s and 70s campus tactics, so this isn't even new. But what's new is that the perpetrators of these tactics, the perpetrators of these shutdowns claim that they feel unsafe and that they're the victims even though they're the ones terrorizing other students and faculty.
Thank you. And Daniel, also just this, I guess you could call it a fairy tale world, this eternal, perpetual childhood that these students live in. For instance, this whole thing about safety. Like, look, I expect myself when I live in this world, all kinds of things can happen. Nothing is guaranteed. There could be a car accident. Something could happen over here, or I could get attacked over here. You know, this is life. Life is full of risk. There's no guarantees. And yet for these adults, they're not even children. For these adults, they're demanding a safe environment. And they're demanding that the government and that the university administration guarantee their safety. And for adults to be doing this, pretty pathological. And what do you think about it? There's some kind of fairy tale world here, some kind of stunted psychological development?
When they talk about safety, they don't mean personal safety as in I'm about to be shot. They do make these Ferguson links. But the bottom line, when they talk about I feel unsafe, they mean that their ego is challenged. They mean that their ego is threatened. When they talk about safety, it's in terms of their identity, which means their views are challenged. They feel uncomfortable. They feel unhappy. And they link safety directly to that. So they will say, we feel unhappy because our identity is threatened. We need mental health resources. In fact, in a number of campuses, their petitions include added mental health resources for minority students. And this makes us feel unsafe. You're causing us to become mentally ill. You're causing us to become depressed, and so on and so forth.
No, absolutely. But there is that one realm where they are implying that there's going to be violence and that they're physically unsafe, etc. That one realm does exist. Okay, look, let's get to, there's so many pathological branches of these totalitarian impulses and everything that's happening on the American campus. Another very creepy thing that happened on one of these campuses the other day, the black-only healing space. And on one of these campuses, white people and non-black people actually had to leave because there was a black-only healing space. And my question is, what's next? Separate water fountains? Separate bathrooms? I mean, really something else here. What do you make of this one incident and what it really reveals about the left?
If you think about the whole name Black Lives Matter, it's a clear rejection of equality. It says that people are not equal. So that's their whole agenda down the line. Their agenda is not certainly not creating a colorblind society, but not even an equal society, but a society in which they're privileged, in which they're entitled, and in which they're superior. They're conducting emotional terrorism. They're conducting protests. They're conducting harassment in support of this kind of privileged status for themselves.
Overall, Daniel, how would you describe this leftist movement on campus and what's behind it?
It's a hate group. I mean, Black Lives Matter, for example, these types of organizations are open hate groups. If you flip the races, there would be no question about it, because if you had a white organization that claimed its goal was to disrupt black spaces, if it went into these spaces and screamed and harassed black people, there would be no question that this is a hate group. And this would be typical behavior for the KKK back in the day. So first of all, it's a hate group, but behind it is, again, it's cultural Marxism. It's this kind of left-wing campus organizing whose goal is to terrorize faculty and to giving them even more and more control over campuses and universities, because the left needs this kind of control, because that's its point of indoctrination. That's how it reproduces itself and manufactures its agenda.
Thank you, Daniel. And you know, it's always very fascinating, frightening, how utopian revolutions always eat their own children. We saw this happen with the Bolsheviks that built communism and then were devoured by Stalin. Always a repetitive theme in utopian revolutions. And we're seeing it again here, following the example of communist revolutions on the campuses now. If you watch carefully, these are leftist professors and leftist administrators now being eaten and devoured by the new generation of leftists.
This is what fanatic extremists do. That's why the Cultural Revolution reference is so relevant, because the left has no point at which it just naturally stops. So it either has to be made to stop, or it continues to devour itself. It pushes into greater and greater extremes of left-wing radicalism until either there's a bloodbath or the whole system collapses.
Right. Well, we know that under Stalin, the killing machine took on a life of its own. And there always have to be kulaks. And when the kulaks run out and there's no more kulaks, these totalitarian killing machines have to create new kulaks, correct?
Indeed, that's the whole impetus of it. They need resistance in order to justify their power. They need this kind of constant bloodshed, this kind of constant purges, these kinds of constant class enemies to fight. So even if they can't find them, and it's pretty hard to find conservatives on campus these days, they'll just purge their own.
Daniel Greenfield, it was an honor and a privilege once again to have you on the Glazov Gang. Thank you.
Good night.
And to our audience of the Glazov Gang, please remember, if you like this show and you appreciate what we talk about and how we try to get the truth out, go to jamieglazov.com and support this program. And also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll see you on the next edition of the Glazov Gang. Good night.